welcome to lecture 3. Now, in the last class we discussed chemical thermodynamics and we spoke about enthalpy of formation, enthalpy of combustion, then adiabatic flame temperature. Now, in this class we will first take up those and review those little bit and cover a few things associated with those once more. So, that this will serve as a lecture where you refresh what you had learned last time, plus towards the end of the lecture we will hope to discuss chemical equilibrium. Now, if you look at Turns's book, there are some graphical representations of enthalpy and enthalpy of formation, enthalpy of reaction, things like that. So, I want to show you some of these. So, for example, this one here, it shows graphical representation of absolute enthalpy, heat of formation and sensible enthalpy. Yeah. So, you will notice that this is absolute enthalpy plotted as a function of temperature and for two species, one is O2 molecules and the other is oxygen atoms. So, this lower line is for oxygen molecules and the upper line is for oxygen atoms, and the x axis is temperature in Kelvin. So, that goes from 0 all the way up to 6000 Kelvin. So, the reason I wanted to show you this is that first of all you can observe a few things. This temperature, there is a vertical line here. Okay. So, this temperature you can guess, I think what should this temperature be? This must be 298 Kelvin, because at that temperature you are seeing that O2 molecule has a value of 0, enthalpy of 0, because that at 298 it is enthalpy of formation only, there is no sensible enthalpy change. So, that is just 0, and oxygen atom does not have a value of 0 because it is not a stable state of oxygen. Okay. So, oxygen at 298 Kelvin 1 atmosphere exists as a diatomic stable molecule. So, it is not O atom. So, O atom is not the stable state. So, it has some value. Now, this value you can read from the graph, but the value is roughly 249195 kilojoule per kilomole of oxygen atom. So, it is about 250,000. Where does this come from? Now, for oxygen atom the bond dissociation energy is 498390 kilojoule per kilomole of oxygen molecule. So, for oxygen molecule the bond dissociation energy is 498390 kilojoule per kilomole of oxygen molecule. So, if you want to form oxygen atom, then you have to break that bond, and that bond dissociation energy is 498390. So, oxygen atom must have an enthalpy of formation which is half of that. Why is it half? Because you break one O2 molecule, you get 2 atoms. So, that is why this value of roughly 250,000 which you see from here. If you go to some other temperature, and the book actually shows this temperature at 4000 Kelvin. At 4000 Kelvin you can see that there is an enthalpy of formation, let us say, and there is a sensible enthalpy change. So, this is something which we discussed last time. So, the additional effect which you see here over the baseline value is the enthalpy of formation of oxygen atom. So, this is known, but this will, you learnt it last class, but this acts as a revision. Now, this is another graphical representation which the book has, and you can see this here. So, this shows you enthalpy as a function of temperature. So, this is capital H as a function of temperature for reactants and products. So, you see two lines, and one line is for reactants, this one line is for reactant, this line is for products, and the reaction that we are considering is a stoichiometric methane air mixture. Stoichiometric mixture, remember again what it is? It is the mixture which has certain methane, certain amount of methane, but a theoretically correct amount of air for that same amount of methane. So, that is the stoichiometric mixture. So, that is for that methane air mixture the reactant enthalpy is plotted as a function of time. If you do that, then you get this line. Okay. and for products you get another line which goes like this. So, at 298 Kelvin the enthalpy of reactants is minus 74,831 again in kilojoule per kilomole units. So, where does that come from? Why is it not 0? 298 Kelvin. Yeah, so it has got methane, it has got oxygen, it has got nitrogen. Oxygen and nitrogen will not contribute, but methane will contribute. So, this value is actually non-zero. So, there is an enthalpy of formation for methane which comes into picture here. So, that is the enthalpy of the reactants. Now, the enthalpy of products are shown here, which is minus 877,236 value. Now, we will be able to calculate this if we have the basic data. Last class we saw that enthalpy of products must be summation of number of moles of products into individual enthalpies, and the individual enthalpies can be the enthalpy of formation plus a sensible enthalpy change. If you are talking about 298 Kelvin, then there is no sensible enthalpy change. So, you can take the enthalpy of formation of the product species that you get, right. I am just talking about, I am only talking about the 298 Kelvin coordinate. So, for that there is no sensible enthalpy business. So, if you just use enthalpies of formation of CO2, H2O and nitrogen, then you will be able to get the value of H product. Now, if you take a difference between the two, then you should be able to get enthalpy of reaction. So, this is enthalpy of reaction, right. This is also something which we discussed last time. So, now you would feel hopefully a little better because you are now seeing numbers, and tomorrow we will do some calculations also, some numerical problem solving. So, here you can see that this is minus 877,236 minus, so this is H product minus H reactant. The value that you get, that is the enthalpy of the reactants. So, this is enthalpy of combustion. So, this is enthalpy of reaction, which is the same as enthalpy of combustion. We were talking about a reaction which is a combustion reaction. Now, what should the unit of this be? This must be kilojoule per kilomole of methane. So, for 1 kilomole of methane, this is the enthalpy of reaction that you get. So, if you want to convert it to kilojoule per kg of methane, then you have to divide it by the molecular weight of methane. So, the molecular weight of methane, you know, it is 16, but actually a more exact value is 16.043. So, if you use 16.043 to divide this 802.405 which you just now saw, then you should be getting about 50, right. So, that will be 50 megajoule per kg, that is the kind of number that you will get, right. I mean 50 means 50,000, I meant 50,000 because this is 800,000 divided by 16. So, this is 50,000 which is like 50 megajoule per kg. This is the heat of this is the enthalpy of combustion, but if you change the sign you get heat of combustion that I told you last time. So, this heat of combustion is for methane. Now, a typical hydrocarbon will have 45, 50, 55 this sort of values, you know. So, this is a typical value of hydrocarbon heat of combustion. So, this is a good number to remember because we are doing a combustion course. We should have, even if you do not have the book in front of you, you should know that this sort of values are expected. Okay. One more thing that I would just like to mention is that we spoke about heat of combustion, enthalpy of combustion, heat of combustion, but heat of combustion also has, heat of combustion is heating value, and heating value can be higher heating value and lower heating value. And I think most of you know this, right? How many of you haven't heard about this before? I think all of you must have heard of it. Oh, one or two of you haven't heard about this before, but the higher heating value, which we call HHV, is the value that you get when the vapor, water vapor produced in the combustion product stream is condensed. Okay. So, you will get water vapor. If you have combustion of these fuels, then you will get water vapor typically, and if you have this water vapor, if you condense it, you get this enthalpy of vaporization out. Okay. So, that will help in increasing your heating value. So, that is the higher heating value. So, that is higher heating value, and then there is lower heating value. What you should do is again consult the book and find out what these values are. So, what I was trying to tell you today is that knowing the values is actually important. Knowing the values is important because that will give you a feel of what kind of numbers to expect. Okay. We were also discussing adiabatic flame temperature. So, I thought I will show you a little bit on, again, some very simple graphical representation of this. So, this is extremely simple. So, this is plotting small h kilojoule per kg of mixture as a function of temperature. Again, there are two lines for reactants and for products. Think about whether these lines are actually straight lines or not. Okay. Are these supposed to be straight lines? So, I am not giving you the answer right now, but I think but Cp is actually not constant, isn't it? Cp is a constant only when we assume it to be so. Yeah, so these are not likely to be constant. Okay, so there is an enthalpy of reactants line, there is an enthalpy of products line. Typically, you will know Ti. So, this is the initial temperature. Reactants are at the initial temperature. So, you can look at this line, and at that temperature Ti, you can pick up the enthalpy of the reactants, and if you go parallel to the x axis, that means a constant value of H, then you will pick up another point on the product line, and the temperature corresponding to that is the adiabatic flame temperature. So, I just briefly alluded to how to get this adiabatic flame temperature in the last class. I said that you can go to tables at the back of the book and pick up enthalpies of formation and sensible enthalpy changes for various substances, various species, that is CO2, H2 and all that, and from that you can calculate the enthalpy of products for an assumed value of the adiabatic flame temperature. Okay. So, that will give you some number which will typically not be equal to the enthalpy of the reactants, because you are after all making a guess. So, it will generally not be equal to the enthalpy of the reactants. How do you calculate the enthalpy of the reactants? Very easy, because you know the enthalpy of formation and you know the temperature and you know the composition of the reactant stream anyway, because that is in your hands. So, you can calculate that. For products, you do not know the temperature, right. So, you assume a temperature and calculate enthalpy of products, and then you try to pick up values from the back of the book and calculate Hp and compare that with H reactants and see whether these two are equal or not. If they are not equal, then you have to make an intelligent guess as to what the other temperature will be, what the next guess temperature will be, and keep doing it a few times back and forth, and then ultimately you will arrive at a value of T adiabatic for which the product enthalpy will be equal to the reactant enthalpy. Again, since we are trying to refresh our memory, remember that we are making an assumption regarding products. Okay. So, if you want to solve this problem of getting the adiabatic flame temperature, you have to have some product composition, right. So far we have discussed only one model. So far we discussed the situation when the carbon and the hydrogen and the sulfur and the fuel, they go to their highest oxidizable state and then reach CO2, H2 and things like that. So, they give so called ideal products of combustion, and if you assume that, then you will be able to write HR equal to Hp iterate and get the product temperature, fine. But again, remember what I told you last time, that the product composition is something which we are assuming. Okay. Who told you that you are going to get products of complete combustion? Let us think about it. If you have, let us say, propane with air and you are giving stoichiometric amount of air, can we say that we will get CO2 and H2O? Just trying to think about it physically. We have this steady flow reactor, which I drew last time with the help of a box. Remember this box with arrows moving in and one arrow moving in, one arrow moving out. So one arrow is reactant, the other arrow is products. So for such a situation, if you have, let's say, propane as an example, and you are giving 5 into 4.76 moles of air, that is 5 within bracket O2 plus 3.76 N2, right? We wrote this last time. So you were giving this amount of air. Can we say with certainty that we are going to get CO2 and H2? CO2, H2, and of course nitrogen. Nitrogen is inert, no? Nitrogen is not reacting. So do we really know that? Who tells us that? We don't really know. We don't know. All that we can say is that if you have maybe less than 5, then you are very unlikely to get CO2 and H2. It will not happen, right? If it is less than 5, you are sending small amount of air. Okay, instead of 5, let it be 2. You understand what coefficient we are talking about, right? Should I write it again? Okay, I will. So I am talking about this 5 that you see here. There is only one 5. Okay, this 5. So if it is 2, you will definitely not get ideal products of combustion because you are supplying less, far less. That will not happen. But my question was not that. My question was, if you supply 5, do you get CO2 and H2? Is there a guarantee? No, there is no guarantee. Why do you say that there is no guarantee? I mean, this is theory. I am writing equations, writing numbers. Who tells you that we will not? If you say products of complete combustion, then we will get products of complete combustion surely. Then you have to have a reason for this. And if you say that I am unsure about whether we are going to get CO2 and H2 only, then also you have to have a reason for that. So what do you think?
At least temperature and pressure in the flame, they will determine the condition. Apart from what you are
Yeah. So this gives what he says is that the flame temperature, pressure, maybe these things will matter as to what products will get. Okay. Yeah, I mean, if the temperature is very high, for example, this CO2 can dissociate. This water vapor can also dissociate. So dissociation means CO2 will break at those temperatures to give you carbon monoxide and oxygen back. Okay. So even if you are giving the right amount of air, it might still dissociate and give you the reactants back, at least partially. Okay. I am not saying that all the CO2 that gets produced when you have stoichiometric combustion will revert back to carbon monoxide, will dissociate to carbon monoxide, not that, but part of it can dissociate at high temperatures. So that is one. Similar thing can happen to water vapor. It can dissociate, it can give you maybe hydrogen, maybe hydroxyl radical, maybe hydrogen atom, stuff like that. So there can be an effect of dissociation. Okay. Now what else? If you have a combustion chamber in which the propane and the air are not mixing well, because you have not designed the combustion chamber well, maybe they are not mixing well. If they are not mixing well, then the air, the oxygen molecule of air may not be able to find propane easily, and there may not be adequate reaction. Somehow combustion remains incomplete. So even when you are sending a stoichiometric amount of air, maybe part of the fuel will not react and go out. Possible? Possible or not possible? Possible. Okay. So this is just some kind of overall balance that we are writing. The equation that you see, C38H8 plus 5 times O2 plus 3.76 N2, that is just some balance that we are doing. We do not really know what happens. Fine. Okay, something more about this. Complete combustion, as I told you, is a model. That is an assumption that you are making. if you do not make an assumption, you cannot really find adiabatic flame temperature, isn't it? Adiabatic flame temperature, again recollect what I said last time, adiabatic flame temperature does not assume complete combustion, right. Adiabatic flame temperature just means that the heat loss is prevented, heat loss or heat gain is prevented, there is no heat transfer, that is all it means. To calculate the adiabatic flame temperature for complete combustion, you assume products of complete combustion, use those in HR equal to HP reaction, then do that iteration business, guessing and then going back and forth to get the product temperature, which is we are calling T adiabatic. All right. Now, if it is not complete combustion, then who tells us what the product composition will be? Let us think about this one. Maybe we can measure, that is one option. We can measure, we can have a gas analyzer at the exit of the combustion chamber and we can measure how much CO2, how much CO, how many moles, etc. So, you can get the concentrations of all these species which we think will be there, right. So, that is one approach, but then we have to, since we are doing a combustion course, we have to start thinking about, is there a way of calculating without measuring? I do not mind if you measure or not, but is there a way to predict something? After all, that is what we try to do, no? When we try to do theory, when we try to write equations, that is what we try to do. So, we may have to do, in some cases we may have to do incomplete combustion assumption, and then there has to be some means of estimating the product composition. Product composition is extremely important, we understand that. Now, so far from the thermodynamics that we discussed, there has been no way of saying whether complete combustion will happen or not. Okay. We have been able to say something, we have been able to say that instead of 5, as I said, if we have 2, then we are not going to get complete combustion, we can say that. But at 5, we are not sure whether we are going to get complete combustion. Even if we give extra air, which is excess air, we are not very sure, because it depends on mixing, it depends on temperature, pressure, it depends on whether dissociation will happen or not, right. If you send more air instead of 5, okay, then it becomes lean combustion. Lean means fuel lean, lean combustion. If you do lean combustion, then maybe you will get CO2 and H2O, and if you send extra air, your combustion product temperature should do what? Should increase, decrease, remain the same? Should decrease, right. So, you can get lower temperatures if you send excess air compared to, I mean, the theoretical, the stoichiometric situation, because there is more inert which will take away the heat. Okay. So, you will get lower temperatures, maybe dissociation will be controlled to some extent. These are some of the things which we can think of, right, but we have to have some strategy, some theory to tell us what will happen if we are not happy, we are not satisfied with the assumption of products of complete combustion. Plus, you can also see that if you send excess air, maybe some oxygen will also come out, right. If it is, for example, rich combustion, less air than necessary, then you will get carbon monoxide, you will get maybe hydrogen and things like that. So, we will have to have some way of knowing their concentrations also. Okay, so that is kind of the background. We will keep discussing this issue of complete combustion and what we can do about the product composition business, but for a little while we will go to something which is associated with adiabatic flame temperature, but not for the case that we discussed last time. So, in the last time we discussed actually this, right. So, we had the steady flow reactor where this reactants coming in and the products going out, reactants coming in and the products going out, and we wrote HR equal to HP, and we wrote this from where? I mean, where did this come from? First law. So this So from here we could see that there is since we are talking about adiabatic flame temperature, Q dot Cv is 0, and there is no reason to think that there is any W dot Cv. So we wrote HR equal to HP, we wrote all that. Okay, but going back to your thermodynamics, when is this equation, this first law is for what situation? Is it the universal expression for first law for all kinds of situations that we deal with as an engineer?
Only closed system.
This is this a closed system? No, it's an open system because there is reactants coming in, there are products going out. So that's one. And we are actually taking this to be a steady state, steady flow situation with reaction taking place. And in this case, we also assume, while solving problem, we also assume that the pressure is constant. Okay. There may be slight bit of approximation involved in this, but pressure can be comfortably taken to be constant. So there is some pressure in the reactant stream, and here in the combustion chamber and outside it, since it's a steady stream just going out, pressure is pretty much constant. The pressure drop inside this we are neglecting, it's a very small amount, let's say. So if HR equal to HP, then we are actually saying that enthalpy of reactants is equal to enthalpy of products in steady state, steady flow kind of a reactor where the pressure is taken to be constant. So let us think about other situations, because this may not be universal. So this is a common situation, but let us think of, let us say, like this bomb calorimeter which you have in the thermal science lab, and some of you have seen that. So this is if you take this as a vessel, just a vessel, and this is a rigid vessel, okay, and it has got fuel and air mixture in it. Like in the bomb calorimeter, we typically in the lab we take either a solid fuel or a liquid fuel. We do not take gaseous fuel, but of course the products of combustion are gaseous, and the oxidizer is of course also gaseous. So you may have done experiment with small amount of kerosene or small amount of some other fuel, maybe a small piece of wood or biomass, whatever, and you have burnt it in the presence of actually oxygen. We use it in the bomb calorimeter. Typically we use oxygen just to make sure that the fuel burns completely. We use a lot of oxygen. Anyway, don't have to think about bomb calorimeter specifically. This is a rigid vessel where there is no heat transfer, let us say. It's insulated and it's rigid. Rigid means its volume is not changing and there is no heat transfer. So there is a Q dot Cv which we are setting to be 0, and do you expect any work done? No, because there is it's just constant volume and there is no shaft or anything, any business like that. So W dot Cv 0. Okay, so what's first law for this? So Q dot Cv plus HR is equal to W dot Cv plus HP. Yes or no? No. So do we write this? Do we write this? No. Okay, that's why I have a question mark. yeah, the previous, this is for a flow process, the steady flow reactor that we are talking about. So, that is a steady state, steady flow kind of equation. Steady state, steady flow situation, we write first law, we get this sort of an equation. Right. So, this is not that, this is a closed system. Okay. So, this will not work. So, remember a couple of rules for this course, just because I am writing something does not mean that it is correct, all right. And just because I am writing I am placing a question mark next to an equation does not mean it is wrong either. So, you have to keep these things in mind for the rest of the course, because sometimes best way to learn things is to just recollect and see what is wrong. Now, this will be wrong for this system. So, what is the first law in this case? So, again go back to thermodynamics, first law for a closed system, what do we write? So, there is a Q that we write. So, 1 Q2 is E2 minus U1 plus 1 W2, something like that. So, this E is energy, and this energy is internal energy plus kinetic energy plus potential energy, and in this case we do not expect much changes in kinetic energy and potential energy. It is just one vessel sitting at one place in which you have this reactants reaction taking place. So, we will not do that. So, this will be U2 minus U1 plus 1 W2, and what else can we say about this? Yeah, so this is 0 and this is 0. So, U2 equal to U1. So, we can write, we will not write 2 and 1 anymore, we will write UP equal to UR. So, that is also first law. So, first law does not necessarily mean that you have to write this, that will be a blind thing to do. So, UP equal to UR. So, UR is a function of two things. It is a function of the initial pressure that you have, it is also a function of the initial temperature that you have, okay. And that is equal to UP, which is a function of, let us say, T adiabatic, and we will write a PF for the final temperature, final pressure. T ad is T adiabatic. So, there is now another adiabatic temperature, adiabatic flame temperature, that is for constant volume combustion. And we cannot really stop here, because if you go to the back of the book you will find that internal energy of formation and things like that, quantities in terms of internal energy are not given. The book does not really have that. The book has, all books, not just the book by turns, all books will have enthalpies of formation. So, everything is in terms of H, not in terms of U. So, we have to bring in H in this. So, we will write HR minus PIV equal to HP minus PF into V. We are doing this only because our data are in terms of H. Okay. So, HR minus HP minus V PI minus PF is equal to 0, and we can write PIV is in R bar T initial So, we can do all of this, and in a particular problem, if you know that the combustion is constant volume, then you can use this equation, and in association with these to find the adiabatic flame temperature for constant volume combustion. So, if you have methane air, for example, at 1 atmosphere 25 degrees Celsius, these are methane and air are the reactants at 1 atmosphere 25 degrees Celsius. So, you can use HR equal to HP, assume constant pressure, right, and get the constant pressure adiabatic flame temperature. But in this case, if you have constant volume adiabatic flame temperature, then you have to use these equations here and again do this guessing and then iterating, things like that, to get the adiabatic flame temperature. Okay. So, this has HR, this has HP. Again, HR you will know, the initial volume, you know the initial pressure, okay, and you can since you have the initial pressure, it should be possible to get the final pressure also. So, you can do all this to get the adiabatic flame temperature for constant volume combustion. So, in one case we should actually as part of an assignment or something, we should calculate, let us say, for a particular hydrocarbon like methane air constant pressure adiabatic flame temperature and methane air constant volume adiabatic flame temperature, and just see how much difference you get. All right. So, that will be important thing to do. All right. Now, we will come to a new topic. So, today we have essentially revised some aspects of chemical thermodynamics for combustion that we discussed last time. So, enthalpy of formation, enthalpy of combustion, we have discussed all that. Only new topic that we have covered is constant volume adiabatic flame temperature. Now, we will do something which is more new than that. Adiabatic flame temperature for constant volume combustion was still something close to what we had done last class, but we will do something which is even newer, that is chemical equilibrium. And we will discuss chemical equilibrium with a relatively simple example first. We will take a rigid vessel. So, taking a rigid vessel, and then let us say we have carbon monoxide and oxygen together. Let us also say that we have 1 kilomole of carbon monoxide and half kilomole of O2, and some pressure, temperature, some initial conditions, okay, and in a rigid vessel. So, that means the volume remains constant. Let us also assume that it is insulated, so that there is no heat transfer. And we know that in this case, just from the work that we have previously done, we know that enthalpy of the products and the not enthalpy, internal energy of the products and internal energy of reactants will be the same, right, just from what we have done a few minutes back. Now, what will be the final state of the mixture? The initial mixture is 1 kilomole of carbon monoxide, half kilomole of oxygen. They will do something, they will react with each other. So, they will burn, they will give something. Okay. So, again, even though this is a stoichiometric amount, we are not sure that we will get CO2. Is this a stoichiometric amount? Yes, because CO plus half O2 gives you CO2. But we still do not know whether we will get only CO2 as the product. So, what will we get? So, that is a question that we will try to address. So, we are not making a complete combustion assumption, not making a complete combustion assumption. Okay. So, there is a possibility that if you have CO plus half O2 left to react with one another in a constant volume vessel when there is no heat transfer, then part of that CO2 will actually react. So what should I write after the plus sign? Any idea? Let us try to make this more interactive. You tell me what I should write here. So, I am writing 1 minus alpha CO2. That means I am saying that it is not 1 CO2. That means a certain fraction from that 1 mole, 1 kilomole or 1 mole whatever of CO2 has dissociated.
So plus alpha CO plus alpha by 2 O2.
That is correct. So, we will get this. So, this alpha is a dissociation fraction. So, how to get alpha is the next question. Now, if you want to get alpha, then you have to make this assumption that chemical equilibrium will take place. In fact, chemical equilibrium will take place if you leave 1 mole of CO and half mole of O2 together in a vessel, and if you wait long enough, so it will reach chemical equilibrium. So, chemical equilibrium means that it will reach a certain product composition which will become static and which will not change if you have waited long enough. So, we are saying that chemical equilibrium will happen. Seems logical because we are giving it time, we are not disturbing it, it is insulated. So, if we know alpha, for example, if you know alpha, then we will get the product composition, and we also know that UP is equal to UR, that is the first law, and we know how to calculate adiabatic flame temperature. So, once we know the composition, we will be able to use this and get the adiabatic flame temperature. So, we will have the composition as well as the product temperature. That is what we want anyway. You keep some reactants together, finally you want to see what are the products and what is the final temperature. If you leave these products, if you leave the system, the reactant system for long enough time, and then you will get products, and the products will equilibrate in the sense that if you go to that vessel and measure temperature from at different parts of the vessel, upper half of the vessel, lower half of the vessel, anywhere, you take a temperature probe anywhere in the vessel, you should get the same temperature, isn't it? Because you have given it long enough time to mix and equilibrate and give you one single temperature. Okay. That is what equilibrium means anyway. Equilibrium means you will get a single value of temperature everywhere. Right? Similarly, the composition will be same everywhere. Spatially, with space, different parts of the vessel will not give you the same, will not give you different compositions and different temperatures. Same composition, same temperature everywhere. Fine. And we are saying that we expect chemical equilibrium to happen because we are giving it sufficient time. Now, we want the composition. Once we have the composition, we can get the temperature, because who is going to tell us the composition? We have to calculate the dissociation fraction. Now, who gives us the dissociation fraction? Cannot you use first law? First law will not give us the dissociation fraction, will it? No. First law can, if you tell the composition, that means if you tell first law, which is here, U are equal to UP, then using that composition you can get the temperature. Okay. But dissociation fraction has to come from somewhere. And since some of you have done thermodynamics last semester, Okay, you should have a clue. So, what should we do? We have to call upon some other equation. Yes. So, the answer that I got is we can use equilibrium constant, but what other physical principle should come into picture? Second law. If you bring in second law, first law will not be able to help us on this. If you bring in second law, then it should be able to give us the composition. So, first law just tells you U p equal to U r, can never tell you about the composition that you get. You can get many different possible compositions which will still give you U p equal to U r. Okay, so, you have to bring in second law. Now, second law will mean that you calculate the second law will mean you calculate the entropy I think this is big enough. Yeah, this is good. So, if you calculate the entropy of the products, for example, and plot it as a fraction of CO2 that is dissociated or undissociated. So, that means either you plot alpha or 1 minus alpha, then you can get an idea of the product entropy as a function of the dissociation fraction. So, this plot is taken from Turns's book, and you can see that we have the fraction of CO2 undissociated, 1 minus alpha is plotted here, okay, and that is the x axis. So, it will go from 0 to 1. If you remember your equation, at this equation some time back, just showing you the right hand side. So, this is 1 minus alpha CO2 plus alpha CO plus alpha by 2 O2. That means, if alpha is equal to 1, then there is no CO2. Alpha equal to 0 means there is no CO. So, going back to the figure, the entropy of the mixture can be plotted as a function of the fraction of CO2 that is undissociated, which is 1 minus alpha, and it shows up like this. So, 1 minus alpha equal to 0 means alpha equal to 1, that means all of it has dissociated, that means there is only CO and oxygen, that means it is the original reactants, correct. All of CO2 has dissociated, so you get the original reactants. So, in that case, the temperature that you get is the minimum, it is the initial condition basically. On the other hand, if you have alpha equal to 0, then 1 minus alpha is 1, that means you are on the right hand side here. So, there you get the maximum flame temperature. So, this temperature, this is the lower line here which you see on the plot, temperature must have been calculated using first law, U p equal to U r. Okay. So, do you have any comment to make regarding this temperature? Why is this temperature so high? 1 minus alpha equal to 1, the temperature seems to be highest. Why? So, what you I think are trying to say is that 1 minus alpha equal to 1 means alpha equal to 0. So, there is no CO2 which is dissociating. So, this is entirely exothermic, I think that is what you mean to say. Otherwise, there is a part of dissociation which will eat up the energy that is generated. So, this is complete combustion, correct. So, the complete combustion gives you the highest value of flame temperatures, but in this case we do not expect complete combustion to take place, because if you are leaving it for a long amount of time, long length of time. So, you get this temperature is a more likely temperature. So, this is an equilibrium temperature, okay, which corresponds to an equilibrium value of 1 minus alpha here. Who tells us this? Second law. And of course, this will require analysis, but roughly this is what it is. You can calculate the product entropy by looking at entropy data from the back of the book for each species and summing them up and things like that. Possible to do it, right. So, that is how you got S as a function of 1 minus alpha, and you will see that this S has a maximum. So, it is not monotonic. What does monotonic mean? That it just keeps on increasing or just keeps on decreasing, it is not that. So, it goes up and then it comes down, and there is a particular value of 1 minus alpha for which entropy becomes a maximum, and you have done enough of second law, enough of thermodynamics. So, you can probably guess that this must be the equilibrium composition. So, if the system tends to have a value of 1 minus alpha which is lower than the value at the dashed line. So, suppose instead of being at the dashed line you are at 0.4, then the system will automatically on its own try to reach the maximum, or else if 1 minus alpha is let us say at 0.6, on its own again it will try to move in this direction to reach the maximum. That is what second law says, isn't it? It is an isolated system because there is no heat transfer, you are not doing any work, rigid vessel, fine, insulated, you are not doing anything to it. On its own it will try to reach the maximum value of S. Okay. So, that is what it does, and wherever it does, that gives you the value of 1 minus alpha corresponding to equilibrium, and it will also tell you this temperature is the equilibrium temperature. So, this is the equilibrium adiabatic flame temperature for this system. All these are adiabatic flame temperatures, all these, right. Only the one which is marked here at TEQ is the equilibrium flame temperature. This one on the right hand side, my right hand side here, is the adiabatic flame temperature corresponding to complete combustion, correct. This one is adiabatic flame temperature corresponding to equilibrium combustion. This one is adiabatic flame temperature when nothing is happening, okay. No product is getting formed, the reactants are remaining as such. So, we understand this graphically, that the second law will help us get the composition, but in this class we just do not have enough time to discuss how the adiabatic flame temperature will be calculated, how we in fact apply second law to get this entropy maximum thing and get the composition. So, as was pointed out by one of you, that equilibrium constant approach can be used, but the equilibrium constant approach in fact derives itself from the second law of thermodynamics, which you probably be able to connect to now. Okay. Think about the thermodynamics which you have probably done in the last semester. So, the second law will lead you to equilibrium constant, and that equilibrium constant will help us get this value of equilibrium composition. So, we will do that in the next class. We will not be able to do it today, and I think what you have to do as homework is to go through the worked out examples on heat of combustion, adiabatic flame temperature and all that from the book, and if possible, if you still have time, do some problems on chemical thermodynamics and start reading up on chemical equilibrium from Turns's book. Okay. So, we will close here now.
Sir, what is this S mixer into 20, sir?
Oh, okay. So, we will just take this question before closing. The question here is that in this particular graph that we have S mixture into 20. So, this S mixture into 20 it is nothing really, it is just that it says that S mix value is the mixture entropy for a particular value of alpha that you assume. So, you understand how this plot is made, right. You say, let us say you assume 1 minus alpha is 0.6, for that 0.6 you can calculate the mixture entropy. So, that gives you certain S mix. Now, he has multiplied it by 20, otherwise the values are too low to show up on this plot, that is what it means. Okay. All right. So, I think we are running out of time, so we will close here. Thank you.